together to talk about all the things we used to do. The laughs, the passions, the little Sebastians, the pits we fell into. And we're putting it all in a podcast. Then we'll send it up into the sky. We're calling it Parks and Recollection. Come on, little podcast, spread your wings and fly.
Well, welcome to another very special episode of Parks and Recollection. We have a very important guest today. We don't always have guests, do we, Alan?
We have guests when we can trick people into coming on this podcast. And today we did, and it's an outstanding guest.
It's Dean Holland, everybody. Dean Holland
Dean
is
Holland,
here.
director extraordinaire, director of, I think, the most Parks and Rec episodes of any human being. Is that true, Dean?
That would be correct, yeah. By probably like fourfold, I think.
What is the number? How many parks did you do?
I officially directed, I believe, 27 of them.
Oh my God, that's actually more than I even thought. That's
more than a whole season.
I know. And Dean started out as an editor a long time ago, and then became such a great director. He became pretty much the go-to director for the show. So very, very glad to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
And to this episode that we're doing today, was this your first episode you directed of Parks?
This was my first episode of Parks that I directed, and my second episode of television.
Wow. You did one of The Office, is that right?
I did one at The Office, and then this was my first one at Parks, yeah.
For the Office nerds, what was the title of your Office episode?
The Duel. It's the one where people always remember Andy ran over Dwight with his car. They were battling over Angela.
So you were kind of a baby director on this, and I remember because you and I did a number of episodes together, including Sweetums, which is 3 episodes after this. And I remember being on set with you, and we were like, we are the bosses right now. We looked around, it's like, who's supposed to tell us what to do? It's like, we're here. We're the
I remember looking at you, and I'm like, there are no parents here.
Yeah.
I go, and I'm looking at Alan, who I think was 11 at the time.
Yeah, something like that.
I looked at you. I was just like, did they really leave us in charge of all of this?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to be? It was a very strange feeling.
It's an example of learn by doing, right? And I think, watching this episode last night, I was like, I know I'm not just blowing smoke, up your ass, because it's like, it's a well-directed episode. That ending is really terrific. I was like, man, and that's your second episode of television. That's really cool.
It was a really awesome script. Like the whole kind of caper aspect of it was so fun, right? And I think like we probably truly had the best episode a couple minutes longer, but it still worked out really well.
I love that. Spoken like an editor, for real. He's like, the director's cut was better. We should do some housekeeping, Rob, and just let people know when this episode aired. It was episode 7 of season 2, aired October 29th, 2009. Written by Michael Schur, heard of him. He's the creator of the show, and directed by, of course, our guest, Dean Holland. We got to do a synopsis so people know what episode we're talking about.
Okay.
So you'll have to sit through me explaining the episode. Here's the synopsis for my synopsis sisters and brothers. The episode opens with Leslie confronting her peach-eating arch nemesis, teenage Greg Pikitis, the titular Greg Pikitis, in the high school hallway about his past Halloween hijinks. Leslie enlists the help of her boyfriend and local cop Dave to tail Pikitis to make sure he doesn't vandalize the statue of Mayor Percy once again. Meanwhile, Anne reminds the Parks Department about her Halloween party and is disappointed to find out that Jerry has spilled the beans to Tom. Anne's party is off to a boring and awkward start until Tom arrives dressed as T-Pain and turns the living room into a dance floor. As the party continues, a possible spark between Ron and Wendy is kindled. The tailing of Pikitis turns up nothing, and while on the way to Anne's Halloween party, Leslie and Dave stop by Leslie's office, and the two discover a vandalized Parks Department. Leslie is sure Pikitis is the perpetrator and has Dave bring in Greg for questioning after getting nowhere with him. Andy goes in hot with the FBI persona Burt Macklin. But Pikitis is so mean to him, Andy ends up crying. Soon, Pikitis' mom shows up and threatens to sue. After a few beers, we reach the conclusion of the episode. Andy and Leslie decide to TP Greg Pikitis' house. An unfamiliar woman opens the front door. Leslie fears she has the wrong house until it's revealed that Greg goes on Craigslist to hire fake moms to get him out of trouble, and the woman standing in front of them is actually Greg's real mom. When Leslie realizes Greg's not at home, she rushes to the statue of Mayor Percy and catches Pikitis in the act of vandalizing the statue. A flashback in the tag shows Pikitis pretending to be a janitor, hiding in the dumpster until everyone had left, and vandalizing the office. A lot of plot in this one, and that's why it's like a caper-style episode.
Yeah.
So that's one of the longer synopses we've ever had.
Yeah.
A lot of story to churn through. That's why he said the best version was 2 minutes longer, according to Dean. He's like, why isn't it longer, man?
But by the way, like if you go back and watch it, you can see that we shot every scene that we shot that Pikitis was in, but you don't see him. It's there. And we made very specific edits that as we're panning off something, you see Pikitis walking in, but we cut instantly. It was all very true to the caper, and so that you could prove that Pikitis actually got in there.
Rob, did you see him? I saw him in the Jerry scene where he gets caught in the cobweb, but I've seen the episode enough times, I think.
Yeah.
I probably looked at the edit with you at some point, but there's a scene, just like a nothing scene kind of, but it's basically to get Pikitis walking across the screen in disguise.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I thought it was David Spade in a Halloween costume.
Yeah, that kind of looked like it, right? It's like,
Oh, very much so.
Equally likely.
Yes. And watching it last night, I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, I think this may have only been your second thing as a director, but you were the first guy smart enough to set a scene in Magic Hour.
That was, and I learned that the hard way too. You always just sit there and go, oh, it'll be right at dusk. We'll just do it there. And the DP will look at you and go, you're fucking nuts. We don't do that.
yeah, because we don't have time. We don't have time.
No, we don't have time for that. But we did it, and it was great. I mean, we had to be there during the day, and we had to be there at night. And so we knew we could sneak in one moment right at that dusk hour. And you see it, even I have a talking head, I think, of Pratt. And it's like that sun's going down. We were really, I think we had to bring in lights as we were shooting the talking head because we couldn't see him.
There's a reason that Magic Hour is a thing. It looks flippin' beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
And it's that hour. It's that magic hour when the sun is right above the horizon or just below the horizon. It literally is an hour.
Yeah.
That's why they call it Magic Hour. And Terrence Malick movies, the entire movie is Magic Hour.
Yeah. And technically, really, I think you have about a half hour, right? You have a half hour that you can shoot something where it looks consistent. Otherwise, it's either too bright or too dark, And it happens, depending on what time of the year it is, it happens a whole lot faster.
On the list of priorities of Parks and Recreation, how low would you say lighting is? And this is no disrespect to Trim.
No, none whatsoever.
DP or lighter, but none, zero, right?
I think it's probably how we all approached it, as in, to us, point the cameras at the actors and let the actors be funny. Let the script be funny. Don't mess around with it. Don't try to do anything fancy. Get it. Now, so priority of lighting, it's probably number 4, 5, or 6, and, but I think it's such a massive difference when we focused on the scripts and the actors being funny, and no one thinks about the lighting then.
For sure.
I also think this episode might have the most amount of night shoots.
Yeah.
In any episode.
How was it? Do you remember shooting it, Dean? Was it a lot of so night shoots, you go obviously at sundown and it's kind of a grind for the crew,
It is. I think we tried to do it more like splits, so we didn't shoot all night. We, each day would be like a call time around 12 and we went till 12 or 1 at night. And that way we could maximize shoot during the day and the night and not have to have people working till 6 o'clock in the morning.
I like splits. Rob, do you like splits? I'm not a super early morning person, so splits, I'm like, yeah, noon to midnight.
Yep.
I like
that works for me too.
I love splits and hate night shoots. One of the great, I did a movie with Ricky Gervais that he directed, and one of the things I was like, you and I are going to get along just fine. He's like, I'm going to take a pass on the script. And the first thing he did was took out every single night shoot. Every single one just gone.
That's like me and Aziz after we started shooting in cars. We're like, oh my God, shooting in a car is horrible. We're like, and every script where there was a car scene was like, how about they're walking instead of being in a car? How about they're walking? And you just shoot steady cam. Let's just steady cam walk. And let's not rig a car for 6 hours.
Isn't that like a Carl Reiner thing? He says, how do you make every script funny? The first thing you do, you go through the script and you cross out every night shoot and turn it into a day. And that's how you make it funny.
Yeah.
Just everything should be during the day. That's what's funny.
It truly is. Obviously, all the night shoots, you're staying up till 6 in the morning. A car is a pain in the ass because
I hate
you're
cars.
just rigging the car. You're putting a camera. It's for safety. There's a process trailer, it's just really complicated, and things go wrong all the time.
But also, you can't plan normally for it. Like anything that you're doing with a car, add an additional 2 hours of prep.
Agreed.
Like before you start shooting, it just takes forever.
Something will go wrong. And oftentimes, again, this is some inside baseball stuff, but by the end of a week, you might go later and later, and that's what people call Fraturday. So if you're shooting on a Friday, it often just goes into the Saturday because you're shooting later and later each day. So,
But the thing is if you notice on TV, because it's such a grind and you're doing so many episodes and you're moving so quickly and it's not like a movie, it always makes me laugh. Most TV shows, traditionally network ones, never take place at night because it's just too hard to do it.
It's not pleasant.
And so you never see network television ever. Like the murderers creeping around in the middle of the fucking day. Always. It's the weirdest.
Yeah.
We think there's a serial killer and he only comes out during the day.
They call him the day killer.
Yeah, the sunlight killer. He thrives off the sun.
Yeah.
He's like a plant.
The reverse vampire.
Yeah, he's a reverse vampire. He can't see the moon.
But there's a reason why nights as an audience member are great. They look beautiful.
Yeah.
And they're evocative and they're all these things. And I mean, a night shoot gives you so much bang for your buck and they're so cinematic.
It's
and
gorgeous.
Seeing all of these nights in this episode, they're just so satisfying as an audience, but boy, are they a nightmare to do.
Yeah. It was, this episode was one of those ones that, Yang, you probably know this, it's like kind of like your first shot at it. So you prep like nobody has ever seen. I mean, I knew every single shot I was going to do. I might as well have storyboarded the entire thing because I knew even from the very first shot of Leslie standing in the middle of the school, everything I pitched to Mike, everything was right there. It was like, we knew exactly how we were going to do everything. And then you still go through, you do the whole thing. I remember I came back from the mix and I went straight to Mike and I was like, we're totally fucked. We got to go back and recut this thing. It's not funny at all.
It doesn't work. Well, but no, you're totally right. I remember my first episode. It was also like, I not only shot listed everything, I went to Steve Day, our AD, and just talked to him about blocking. I was like, what is the typical blocking on this show? What do people generally do? Essentially, like, I wanted to shot list every single shot in the entire episode because I wanted to be prepared. You just don't want to screw up your first one. And you didn't because you went on and did 26 more or whatever.
You do. You have to prepare. I did the same thing on The Office when I did that one. You prepare the hell. To be honest with you, I've now directed 90 episodes of television. I kind of still do it. Still do it. My weekend before I shoot, I work the entire weekend. I even go through a script and I write down how I'm going to direct the actors. Like, I haven't even heard them do it yet. And I'll be like, maybe get them to do it like this and do it like that. Because as we all know, right, it's all about options. It's all about giving different performances, different things. And I'll have all of that prepared in my head. And then when I get there, it all goes away and you just go off the cuff and make it up.
But it's in your bones because you've done the work, right? And it actually brings up a good point. A couple things. You came from editorial, you came from post. So when you talk about the pieces, like coming from the writer's room, I didn't realize how much, it's built. They say a film or a TV show is built 3 times. It's built in the writing, built in the shooting, built in the editing. And the post department is so powerful because what you really are, you're putting together these different pieces of footage and fusing them into a whole that tells the story. And so Dean, having cut so many episodes of The Office and Parks, knows exactly the pacing, the sizes of shots he needs, like all that stuff, what works, reaction, line reaction, all that stuff. And then on the day, there's so many parts of directing, right? It's not just the look of it, but it's the performance by the actors, it's the production design, it's all of those things and all of the blocking. Yeah. So, there's so many elements. There's so many ways to go down. People ask
me for advice all the time, like, "Hey, I'm directing my first episode. Do you have any advice?" And I always give a very simple advice. I just say, have an answer for everything.
Yeah,
that's it.
The job is kind of you're the expert on this story, you're the expert on this episode, and I think, Dean, if you can give like a tiny summary of your process when you do an episode, like walk us through just briefly, if you could, your process. Okay, you get the script, then what happens?
It's a funny thing. Like I remember reading Lord of the Rings series, right? And so when Lord of the Rings, the movies came out, I went, oh my God, Peter Jackson saw exactly what I saw. You know what I mean? Like when you read something, you envision it in your head, right? So as I read something, I envision it in my head and I said, okay, they're doing this and they're making this movement and they're walking over here. And then you go, all right, well, how do you cover that? How do you want to see that? So the first thing you do is figure out where they go and what they do, which is your blocking, right? So then you go, how do I cover that? Where do I put the cameras? And then you sit there and go, well, that would take an entire day to shoot. And I have 4 hours to shoot that. So how do I simplify that in a way where my coverage can serve more than one purpose? You know what I mean? That this camera here can shoot this, this, and this. So it gets 3 shots as opposed to 1. So you kind of start to simplify. If I was doing a movie, I would take the time and I would cover it exactly the way I wanted to block it. But with TV, it's a little bit of that factory, that you just kind of have to keep going and move things along more quickly. That's part of the job. So I do that. And then I write up so many notes on a script that you've seen my scripts. Like you can't almost see the actual script anymore because I've written so many things on it. Some of them are blocking. Some of them are directional notes to the performance notes to the actors, all these different things, questions. Sometimes I just write down questions because sometimes I'll bring it up to either the writer or the actor or whatever and ask the question that no one has asked before. And that's one of the biggest things is ask those questions. People don't ask. People get so nervous when they're directing that they kind of just go, I'm supposed to have all the answers, blah, 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 blah. They forget to ask the questions as well, because that's how you figure everything out. I love that you get to work with people in television. I love that you bounce ideas off people. When, if you're directing a movie, everyone just thinks you're a king and you have everything. But I love the collaboration. That's my favorite part.
Well, this is why Dean is a successful television director, because so much of the job is working with other people. Like you're saying, you're not a king, you're not an emperor, you're not just dictating everything. And look, sometimes you get to make decisions and that's great, right? But ultimately, so Dean will do all that work as a director, and say I'm writing the episode or running the show or whatever, we'll have a production meeting where we talk to all of the departments, we go through all those notes, we get to ask those questions of all of our brilliant department heads, and we'll do a tone meeting, which is me and Dean and whoever else is relevant, the line producer or whoever, and then we talk about, we go scene by scene and dissect every aspect, hopefully every aspect of the script before the day. So when you get on the day and there's so much chaos, it's exactly like Dean said, you do as much preparation as you can. You go overboard with the preparation, and then on the day you may have to change everything, right? You may have to change everything.
I'll make shot lists. I make notes on my script. I do everything, and usually I never look at it again. I never look at it again.
You have the binder, right?
You got the binder. And most of the time it's all in here. So then you play the audible and you figure out what you need to change and you just go with it, And then one of my favorite things is the tone meeting, because as a director, you know how you can make something work, and the writer might not have written it that way. And if you have a great writer, you sit there and go, hey, what if we did something like this? And then the writer can rewrite it to work for how you can shoot it, And you have to do that. You have to rewrite things based on logistics, camera movement, all that kind of stuff. And it's this evolving process that never ends.
It's constant. It's constant. And so this one was so fun because you got lucky with your first one. It's not only a caper, it's a Halloween episode. And me and Rob have talked about how much we like the holiday episodes of the show. You ended up doing Halloween episodes, right, Rob? Do you remember what Chris would wear for Halloween? I forget what you wore. Do you remember?
Well, one time he was Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
And then
I don't know.
And then
so
one
funny.
time he was himself as an old man.
Oh wow, I remember. That's dark. I remember that. That's kind of
really dark. Remember when Chris got really dark?
Yeah.
Chris gets super dark towards the end. And the other thing I remember at Halloween episodes, and this speaks to the camaraderie and just the good vibes on the set was we would do a Halloween parade with everybody's kids.
Oh, wasn't it the best?
It was my favorite thing about being on Parks, is particularly because my kids were at that point were just at the point where they'd stopped caring about Halloween, and I missed it. So I would get to see everybody's younger kids come to the set.
My kids were there. I have tons of pictures. They remember going to those still. I mean, they loved it. We had so many kids in our, on our crew that would come in. It was fantastic. But that was our show. Every Halloween, we would stop shooting by 3:00 so that we could do a Halloween for the next 2 or 3 hours.
You guys want to feel old? 2 of those kids are now Supreme Court justices. So it was a long time ago. I mean, it was a long time ago. Both sides of the aisle, though, really.
Yeah, at least there's that.
Yeah.
This is a classic sort of, man, it's really packed, right? It's like got the B story at Ann's house, and then it's got the Burt Macklin cameo. It's got
Right. Now, hey, Yang, was this not the first Burt Macklin?
This is the first Burt Macklin.
This is the birth of Burt Macklin, yeah.
It's so funny when he pretends to throw the coffee in his face and just smashes the mug on the ground.
Which we only did once. Was that
scripted? Was that scripted?
Nope.
Okay.
And believe it or not, I don't think it was scripted. So we do this whole thing, and Pratt goes in there like he's going to take him, he's going to destroy this kid, and then we cut away and we come back. Pratt's crying. That was also, I believe, not scripted.
Oh wow, that's a legendary move. I remember that moment because I feel like maybe we saw it in the cut, like we were watching the cut. We're like, oh wow, that's really funny.
Pratt was an improvising machine. I mean, if you, as a director, I realized quickly I could never go back to Pratt and say, do what you did in the last take. Because he was like, I have no idea what I did in the last take. Every take was completely different. And you just kind of had to grab on and hold on. And he just pulled you along for the ride, It was great. But yeah, this was a really, as Mike and I always used to say, layered episode. Right? It just had joke after joke and storyline after storyline. There were so many beats in this.
You cannot believe it's 21 minutes. It's like these shows, and they move really fast, and we'll talk about it, in season 3 as well, how much faster it gets that season. But yeah, I mean, every character gets a little moment, right? It's like I love seeing Aubrey dressed as a clown, Tom as T-Pain, Ron as a pirate. He's like, I'm a pirate. And so in subsequent Halloween episodes, he's always a pirate in the same costume, which is always really funny. He's like, I'm a pirate. This is what I am every year. It's
think about the Halloween episode, the Halloween party, right? Anne's got a story of how she can't throw a party, right? Then you have Ron, who is kind of connecting with Wendy, right?
You have Mark being tested by her nurse friends. Right?
Yes, right. The subplot of that. And then Jerry, which got cut out, right? Jerry's dressed in a huge dinosaur outfit the entire time, and we reveal that at the end. So we made him wear that costume for like a day and a half, never seeing his face.
That's right, because we see him. I remember that dinosaur because there's one prominent shot of Anne being happy that Tom has revived the party, and you see a dinosaur guy, like basically a giant dinosaur mascot, dancing next to her. That was Jerry. I didn't remember that. He's in the costume. He's acting, and you just don't even see his face. You might as well not be in the episode.
And then you have Then you have Leslie and Pikitis, Leslie and Dave, Leslie and Andy. Andy and Pikitis, Dave and Pikitis, the parents.
I know, and I would say we when we broke the episode, it's ultimately in the A story kind of a Leslie Andy episode, which we had never done before. I think
that was really noticeable.
Yes,
yes. That was like, oh, okay, they've decided to bring Pratt into the big leads.
Yep.
Yes.
He's got his time in the spotlight with the star.
Let's see if this guy can hack it.
It was really, because it was kind of progressing that way that, first, basically Andy's living in a pit, then he gets a job, then he's a shoeshine boy, and now he's kind of moving into being part of the Parks Department.
A very smart move by the showrunners, I gotta say, because he crushes in this episode. I forget that he's not even like wearing the costume, the Burt Macklin costume or anything. But man, he's so funny in that. Like it's just this kid.
Yep, still wearing the same sneakers he wore all 7 seasons.
That's right.
Same sneakers all 7 seasons.
I feel like he wore that shirt in most episodes too. There's that one
about 87%.
Yeah, he's got like a kind of tan plaid shirt that he wears in most of the episodes.
Yep.
So let me ask you something about Burt Macklin. Was that in this? It's very clear what it is. He's doing a bit to crush this kid, and I'm with the FBI, and he just makes up the name and uses that name. But that actually became a character like Ron's character, Duke Silver, is amazing because he really wasn't playing a character. He was still dressed like Andy. He still clearly was Andy, and yet in subsequent episodes, he's Burt Macklin with a fucking FBI jacket
He has
on.
a jacket.
But now technically it's an FBI jacket that he uses white paper tape and puts FBI on his back.
That's right.
Because he dresses up, the next time is in a Halloween episode.
That's what it is.
That he dresses up as Burt Macklin.
Yes.
Yeah.
It all comes together. I believe he dresses up as Burt Macklin and Aubrey dresses up as Janet Snakehole.
And then, yes. And then correct me if I'm wrong, Yang, didn't you write Bus Tour?
Yeah. Yes. I think I co-wrote that with Aisha.
Because that was that was a huge Burt Macklin episode.
The whole episode is
this
is how much a show that goes 7 seasons spirals. It's like a thing that happens in 1.5 scenes, season 2. It's like, okay, well, that's a character now. That game that he plays, he has his own story now. Yep. That's season 6 or something.
And he basically got a TV show out of it in the end. A public access TV show out of it.
I forgot about that.
I mean, look, when he's Burt Macklin, he says, I just remember, in order to think like these guys, you have to think like them, which is like, it's just literally the same thing over and over again. Also, when he walks in, he goes, crappy Halloweeners, that's hilarious. It's just like completely dry read, like not even like just very serious about it. But I really felt, and we've talked about this, but it felt like this was the one that unlocked Andy. And we've, obviously he's grown as a character, but putting him with a fun version of Leslie, there's a fun version of Tom in the B story. Like these characters were just becoming the lightest versions of themselves. Like I feel like, and by the way, there was kind of new blood behind the camera too, right? I feel like, and we went on and did an episode very soon after this, and your second one, I think it was just getting energy up.
We were so hungry. We were so passionate, hungry, willing to please. We wanted everything to be so good. We would take our time. We would never rush off of anything. We would get something and we're like, great, that works. Now what else can we do? Now how else can we make it funnier? How can we up our game even more? We kind of never stopped. The shooting style allowed us to shoot more than we needed. There was always 1,000 things that hit the editing room floor that were never seen that were spectacular.
And that's why some of these episodes we had these longer cuts. So, we can talk a little bit, I think, about process where, I don't think we've covered this in the show before. Basically, when we, an episode gets shot, right? It's just generally a 5-day shoot or something like that. All the footage gets loaded in, and then the assistant editor cuts some of the footage together, and then the editor of the episode puts together what's called an editor's assembly. You can take it from there, Dean, because you've done this more than I have.
Yeah, you'll shoot for 5 days. We come up with our first cut, and our first cut was usually early on around this time. Our first cut was probably 35 minutes. Maybe 40 minutes. And what people don't know when they hear a half-hour show, they think a half hour. No, it was 21 and a half minutes. And you had almost a 30-second main title. So you basically had 21 minutes. And that's a brutal to cut.
It's really
basically hard. You're cutting the show in half. So that's how, like, Mike and I got really good at pulling out words, right? And you would cut around and every edit that turned off to somebody else, I would pull apart words and create new sentences to tighten it up and make it happen so much faster than it did happen, And so anyway, so we would you'd have the long cut, maybe 35 minutes. And then as things went on, the director does a cut, and usually the directors didn't do much. They came in and they know they only have 2 days. They're usually on to another episode at that point. They would change a few things, so it basically stays the same. And then I would take a cut, and I would cut it down to probably about 23 minutes and give it to Mike. Then Mike would probably add another minute back in, and then together we would bring it back down to 23 minutes, and that's what would get sent to the network. Then the network would give our notes, and then Mike and I would squeeze it down to 21:30.
And that same process happens in every show, basically.
Every single episode.
Every episode. But what it doesn't happen on are streamers. And this is my thing about why I think network television gets sort of a bad name. Like, I go to the Emmys right now. There's nobody from network television nominated. Nobody. And do you know how hard it is to make something good within the confines that we're talking about?
Yeah.
Like, if you're making a show for a streamer, if you think it plays at 30 minutes, guess what? It's going to play at 30 minutes.
Yeah.
If you think it plays better at 21 minutes, you can do whatever the hell you want. But with a network, you're a slave to the timing, and that is just the way it is. And you have to kill the babies if you have to kill the babies to get there. And that's what it is. So whenever I say, if you see a network show you like, it's even better than you think it is.
Yes. And on top of that, I'd add, you have to have commercial breaks. So for a 21-minute show, you're talking now, in many cases, 4 acts or something wild like that, where you're writing in a scene has to end at a certain point in time in the episode. You're really cutting around that. It is, and I feel really lucky to sort of have bridged the gap between network and streamer. So I worked on some network shows. I worked on Parks, obviously, for a long time. And then my first show that we got to create together was a streamer. And we couldn't believe on this show editing, right? It's like we can just...
the freedom.
It's like we had 7-minute long takes that we just put into an episode, right?
That's what you point out. Something else, Alan. Like, remember, they would say, "Oh, your act 1 can't be any longer than this or any shorter than that. Act 2 can't be. You have to fit in these parameters." And not only that, but do they want a big story ending for each act? So you can't just end and move on. You have to leave a cliffhanger at the end of every act. And then remember, early on, they added that 4th act, classic 4-act structure.
When Mike came in, it looked like his dog had been shot, because he came in and he was like, we need to do 4 acts now, which is not traditional Aristotelian story structure. You don't hear about the 4 acts of stories. Like, that's not a movie or a play. It's 3-act structure. It's beginning, middle, and end. But then you pop that 4th act in there. Like, NBC's like, what about 4 acts?
And by the way, just so everybody's clear, the only reason there are 4 acts is because they want 4 commercial breaks.
Yeah.
They want more commercials on the show. Yeah. This wasn't some dramaturge at NBC that went, I think everything would be better in 4 acts.
They just want more commercials.
No, it's a bean counter going, we can amortize this show better with 4 acts.
Yeah, and they want your credits over the last 35 seconds of your show. And so you don't want any important content happening because you have credits over it. So it just has to be kind of 30 seconds of jokes that it can't be an important storyline. I remember sometimes we would go to that act 4 and we would move the credits to earlier because it was going to end on something important and we wanted people to watch it. And then there's the fear that the people see the credits coming up, they turn it off.
That's right. That's right.
It was hell. It was hell.
It's tricky. Greg has a question. Producer Greg has a question for Dean. What is it, Greg?
Dean, I'm curious, since you were editing episodes that you were also directing, while you were directing them, did you think about the edits? Did you think about ways you were going to shoot it, cut it, and so on, so that you were already ahead of the game?
Absolutely, Greg. I mean, I do that now. You know what I mean? It just, even though I don't edit my own things now, you, as a director, you have to be editing in your head. How does this cut to that? And if I want to cut this out and I don't like it, how can I bridge 2 moments? You have to think about all those things because you try these things and then go, oh, I don't want to be in a oneer with a joke that I'm unsure about in the middle of it, because then I'm just screwed and I can't get out of it. So it's that's why I've done a lot of oneers and I always cover myself. I always cover myself, because if you're watching something and it's not good, you need the ability to cut it. So look, I was an editor for about 12 to 15 years before I started directing. And so I couldn't help but always think about all of the editing.
Yeah, and basically an editor with people skills can be a great director, because that's important. that caveat
Still
is important.
working on those people skills.
Well, to that point, you were always my favorite director.
Well, thank you.
And I think, I was curious to know. Let's go cast member by cast member for a minute.
Rate them out of 10? No.
So, Rob.
Yes, thank you. I mean, every actor requires a different style of directing. Here's my favorite bad directing. When the director goes, so I was thinking, so you're sitting in this chair, and then, when you say that line about, God damn it, this has to end. Like, I thought maybe you'd, like, walk over to the window. Maybe you're sort of, you say it at the window, and then you turn out, and I go, you just want a shot through the fucking window of me, right? You just tell me that. Just tell me I'd like to do a shot looking through the window, and I will figure out a way to make that work. And there are some actors who would be so fucking offended if you came to them and said that.
Yeah.
And so I get why some people do that, but every actor has to be handled differently.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Isn't that your
absolutely. I mean, I feel like I probably gained with as many as I did, a pretty great relationship with every single actor. For example, you and I, Rob, right? We found that we definitely did the thing of like, here's what they want. So now how do we elevate it? Like, we did all sorts of fun things, right? I mean, we kind of went a little crazy. You and I really dove into who Chris Traeger was, right? I mean, I remember I had you doing pull-ups in the middle of an entire scene the entire time. Right? Do you remember that?
Yes. I'm still hurting.
without even knowing that visual effects would be able to pull this off. But that was one of those things. And it wasn't like we do the pull-ups and then pan away. I was like, no. We need to do the pull-ups and stay there. Pull a whole scene with Rob in the background doing pull-ups. And we had to do some that were that you had to do on your own. And then we were able to slip a little box in there. And as long as you kept your feet the same, they removed the box.
That's right.
But like, I think we found a lot of funny. We dove into Chris Traeger and made him a little crazier than he was. But every other thing that we did, we ended up using. We did a lot of crazy shit and ended up using it. Like Polar was, I never gave her a note for 5 takes because she was learning it. And then once she learned it, I'd go in and I'd be like, so Amy, I think what we should do here is what Leslie Knope is thinking. And she's like, yeah, I know, faster, funnier. And that was like, so we really got into a thing where I was like, Amy, faster, funnier. And that's all I said. Pratt was similar to you, Rob, where we would just try any funny thing we could think of. Nick, who I still work with today, Nick, we had a Ron Swanson from a scale of 1 to 10. And that's all I ever said to him. I'm like, this is Ron at a 10. This is Ron at a 1. This is a Ron at a 4. And we knew. It just like, give me the extent of how Ron Swanson would be. And it's like, we all found our ways. I mean, look, directing 27 episodes, you figure that out. But that was kind of the fun with it. I think like everyone just loved playing around and finding new things and finding what was funny,
It's so funny too that some of the same things you said were things I kind of picked up on set while I was watching you direct and other people direct, but it's a similar thing where like someone like Rob or Pratt or whoever, like they'll do sort of different stuff every take, but certainly for Offerman, I literally did the same thing talking to him, giving him notes like because he's theater. You can adjust him to any level. Like you could be like you could go to like a that was like a 46 out of 100. Turn it to like a 67 out of 100 in terms of how angry you are. Like literally, I would say stuff
100%
as a joke, but also as a real. And he would do it like he did it. He did 67. You're like
100. Well, and by the way, like with Nick, no one had thought about their performance more than Nick. I mean, he knew. Not only did he know every line of his memorized, he knew the entire script memorized. So there was nothing that you couldn't tell him that he hadn't already thought of. So that's why the number scale really became a good thing for him, because it was like Ron Swanson was a very particular character. very specific. So if you just say, how Ron Swanson do we want to be, he would give you that level. And when you said, give me a 4 and then said, give me a 7, there was that 3-point difference. You knew it.
And he was also such a kind man. Like he literally like when he was asking, sometimes, actor will have these lines that they don't quite work or they're a little bit strange to say. And so I still remember him approaching me sometimes and, it's like, oh, Mr. Yankind, sir, do you mind if I changed this "the" to an "an"? And I was like, yeah, you can do that. Like literally he would say like really, really even small changes like that. He was so respectful. And again, I was 8 years old, or whatever you said, Dean. I was a very young person, so it was always like anyone asking me a question, I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. But he was so nice to work with.
Yeah, he's extremely respectful when it comes to that, and extremely respectful to the words that are written on the script. And he wants to try that first. And when he finds that it's not working, Nick's also extremely intelligent and, like you said, classically trained, but also grammar is a big thing for him. And so it was always like, this is grammatically correct how I would say this, young lad.
Yeah, and I also like I think that's really, really smart what you're saying about just letting the actors get some takes in, because like, sometimes a young director or a nervous director will fly in after one take and just be like giving notes to everyone. It's like, look, we're under time constraints. Don't get me wrong. Like we're trying to finish the show and get it all done. But I do feel like I like to give the actors a little bit, get their sea legs under them. Sometimes, look, they might have been given 7 new pages that day and they're learning all that stuff. And I remember seeing, like, this was in the outtakes one year, but I remember Rob doing this one line and I was on set and he would, like the 3rd or 4th take, he was like, and he would finish it and be like, that's an Alan Yang nightmare phrase. Like that is just like the total, like it was just some kind of tongue twister, right? It was just some sort of weird.
And by the way, they're all smart. They know what they're doing. If you give them 2 or 3 takes, they usually fix all their mistakes by the time you get there. I never talk to an actor until the 3rd take. And sometimes more, because those first 2 takes, you're kind of figuring out your cameras. They're rehearsals. Figure it out. Let the actors figure out their mistakes. And then hopefully from there on in, you're actually just giving notes that will make it better, that they've kind of fixed all the problems and we start moving forward of only making it better.
I think I know the answer to this, Dean, but at the end of the episode, Pratt, gets caught by the police TPing the house and then he jumps into the hedges. Was that him or was that a stunt person?
It was him, and it was my suggestion. I was like, Andy Dwyer would never wait for the cops, but I also thought that Andy Dwyer would be really bad at hiding. So it was just we planned this thing where we just flash the lights on him, and he just bolts over. And if you really look at it, it's just one shrub there, so it's like you can see him after he lands. So it was. Yeah, and we didn't have a stunt person because we just thought of it that night. So he just dove over the bush.
There was no mat. There was no mat to jump onto. Either.
There was nothing
for it.
Yeah, I was like, wow, he really disappears in the hedge.
We used to.
He gets air.
Oh yeah,
he's like. It's a good frame by frame moment if you're interested.
And we had there was a lot of. It's ironically when we got to TPing the house, there were not a lot of people who knew how to TP a house.
That's sad.
And yeah, it was. So I had to do a little tutorial of how you get the toilet paper to roll so it gives that strain. And we did break a window.
Toilet paper broke a window?
An egg.
He threw an egg right through a window.
Oh, an egg.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most fun episodes, one of the things I talk about the show is how every episode almost has gifts, parties, or jobs. Like Parks and Rec has like gifts, parties, and jobs in every episode. This one, we got 2. We got a Halloween party, and Leslie gives Andy a temporary job. Just one of the most fun episodes we had. Dean Holland, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to have you back on again because you've done a million of these episodes, but great to talk to you about this one, to pick your brain about the show.
I loved this episode. I loved knowing that this was only your 2nd episode of television. Well done, Mr. Terrence Malick.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Thank you very much.
The second of 90. Thank you, Dean.
Yeah.
Well, we got Dean here. Should we do a town hall? Should we take a trip to a town hall?
I don't know what that is, but it sounds good.
It's a question from a loyal listener.
All right.
Where should we do the town hall today?
Scully's Bar.
Scully's Bar, named after writer Mike Scully, legendary comedy writer, was on the show for a long time, pitched a lot of great jokes, and plays the character Pearl in the show. We're going to do it from Scully's Bar. The question today comes from Bobby K in Brooklyn. And the question is, what's your favorite story that originated from a real-life park, possibly from your hometown? For example, Central Park's Mandarin Duck going viral. That's a very specific example, Bobby K. I have one that's just and is kind of not based on a park, but is based on a real thing, which is Lil Sebastian, which was based on a small horse that got emailed around the writer's room, I think, that we're like talking about kind of, it was a fun sort of harvest festival type thing. We're like, oh, what happens at these little festivals? And there was a horse, I believe his name was Einstein the tiny horse, and we were obsessed with this horse, and we were like, we should put something like Einstein in the show, and that was the origin of Lil Sebastian. So, we always stole from sort of real-life headlines and stuff like that, but, hopefully that's a somewhat satisfactory answer. I'm sorry a duck was not involved, Bobby K from Brooklyn. But
it would have been. If that damn whatever bird had gone viral when we were making the show, you guys would have absolutely.
Oh, absolutely! It's like
version.
The Mandarin Duck is here. The Mandarin Duck is here. Leslie, the Mandarin Duck's about to mate.
Here's a question for you, which we were talking about before you came on. Was the Andy Samberg character after me?
So there's a character named Carl Lorthner, I believe, who is a park ranger played by Andy Samberg, later the star of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, also directed by Dean in part. But he talks very loudly, and for those of you who can't tell over the airwaves, Dean Holland has one of the loudest voices known to man that I've ever heard in my life. Way too loud. Often cannot modulate the sound of his voice.
Nope, you're welcome.
It's very effective for a director because in those old movies where you see the director with a bullhorn, Dean doesn't need one on set because he's audible in literally every room of the set. So,
and I give myself a lot of headaches.
Dean's all the way in Connecticut now, and so we can hear him from there. He has no microphone.
No microphone.
Being recorded, yeah.
Yep.
So that was the town hall. Let's close up Scully's Bar and wrap up the episode, I think.
This is it. I've been sated at Scully's Bar. It's been a great talk, Dean. It's always great to have you. We got to get back on the golf course, but in the meantime,
absolutely.
Thank you all for listening to this cool episode of Parks and Recollection.
Greg Pikitis, one of the classic episodes. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, producers Schulte and Greg. And goodbye from Pawnee.
Thank you.
Parks and Recollection is produced by Greg Levine and me, Rob Schulte. Our coordinating producer is Lisa Berm. The podcast is executive produced by Alan Yang for Alan Yang Productions, Rob Lowe for Low Profile, Jeff Ross, Adam Sachs, and Joanna Solitaroff at Team Coco, and Colin Anderson at Stitcher. Gina Batista, Paula Davis, and Britt Kahn are our talent bookers. The theme song is by Mouse Rat, aka Mark Rivers, with additional tracks composed by John Danik. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Parks and Recollection.
This has been a Team Coco production in association with Stitcher.